What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to be talking about some roster decisions. Now, I asked you guys last week to give me a list of players you are currently struggling with on your roster, whether they were players you were worried about cutting or players you didn't know if you should be keeping at the moment. I'm going to be going through all of those guys today. We have almost 100 players in total, every single fantasy relevant position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. So we will go through all of those guys. I'll show you guys exactly who from that list I would be keeping, cutting, and who I might be on the fence about in some of those Dynasty Fantasy Football leagues. So without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start making some roster decisions. All right, so with a video like this, it's very important, I think, we started off with some generalized context, because making a video like this is kind of tricky, because I do think there's a lot of things that go into making roster decisions, like cutting players off of your roster. Now, a lot of that is going to be dependent on how deep your rosters are, how many teams are in your league, what are the scoring settings, what is the direction of your roster as well. Are you a contending team or are you a rebuilding team? Because if you're a rebuilding team, you might want to hold on to a couple of these younger guys, even if we haven't seen anything from them through 1 or 2 years so far. So I bring all of that up to say, use your own judgment. If you play in a league that has some unique settings, try to use some of this information to make it applicable to your league. But I did come up with some general guidelines here to make it applicable for a lot of people. So this is kind of in a 10 to 12 team league type of format. I'm going with roughly 25 roster spots. So that's a player pool of roughly 250 to 300 players. That's kind of the depth in which we're going to be going with. So 300 players deep is about the max where I'm at on this one. If you play in a deeper league, obviously you're going to be making far less cuts because you want to hold as many of the players as possible. But if you play in a shallow league, 18, maybe only 20 roster spots, you're going to be cutting a lot more players than I am in this one. So I wanted to just get that context out of the way, make it applicable for everybody. I think it's very, very important that you guys understand that, because like I said, you need to use your own judgment for your own cuts, but this is how I'm going to be viewing this list. So that said, let's just pull up the quarterback and the tight end right away, because I think these are the two easiest positions right now. These were the least amount of players for the positions. You guys had a lot of running backs and wide receivers, but looking at the quarterbacks, this is kind of how I'm viewing the list that you guys gave me. Jalen Milroe, Anthony Richardson, Quinn Ewers, Justin Fields, and Aaron Rodgers were all players that I am keeping from that list. It's pretty simple for me. I want to stash high upside rushing quarterbacks, even if they're backups, but I'm less likely to stash some of these pocket passers unless it's something like a 6-point passing touchdown scoring league or a larger league. But that left some other guys here on this list that I think Will Howard, Geno Smith, and Deshaun Watson are probably on the fringe, and guys like Spencer Rattler, Davis Mills, Will Levis, and Aiden O'Connell are on the cut list. Now, Rattler, Mills, Levis, O'Connell, I think they're easy cuts. These guys are just backup quarterbacks that I don't think have a lot of upside right now. Probably not going to be guys that we can rely on, even in a 12-man league, really. If we're having to plug them into our lineup, we're not in a great spot. And I think you can get these guys later in the offseason, just as we see these depth charts start to figure themselves out. Let's talk about the guys who are on the fringe. Will Howard, for me, is a player that I think is in that in-between territory. I lean cut on him if I had to choose, but you have to bring up the fact that Aaron Rodgers is potentially retiring, or he's a free agent. He could come back here. I know they talked about wanting to bring him back. Will Howard, maybe even if that happens, would not even be the guy here for the Steelers. So I think that's why I'm leaning the cut here. It does, leave him in an in-between territory, because there is just a small, simple pathway for him to potentially see some opportunity. Geno Smith is another player that I think could have a possibility at some pathway to opportunity. It's tough to tell you what's going on with him right now. I think in a 10-team league, I would be cutting him. In a 12-team league, I may be willing to hold on to him just because there's a chance that he ends up becoming this bridge quarterback for another team. He got money from the Raiders. They're going to need to kind of navigate how to get out of that, but I could see Geno Smith being a Jacoby Brissett type of quarterback for another team in the future. So he's somebody that I'm on the fence about. I think shallower leagues, you're cutting Geno, but deeper leagues, I'm all for holding Geno because there is a chance at a bridge quarterback. Deshaun Watson's the other guy that I wanted to talk about. I think the talent tells you he should be a keeper, but we are also years removed from when he was relevant. So kind of feels like I'm holding on to a dream. I think in a 12-team league, you could keep him, but I think the easier decision and maybe the better decision for most people is to just cut Deshaun Watson at this point in time. Sounds like they're going to give Shedeur Sanders a shot in 2026 with this new coaching staff. I don't expect Deshaun Watson to be around in the NFL for too much longer, and I don't expect many NFL teams really willing to give him a shot again either as a starting quarterback. Now, looking at the tight ends, there's lots of keeps in here as well for me. There was a lot of tight ends that I just wasn't okay with cutting. I think this is one of the positions that I'm more likely to be stashing throughout the offseason. We see a lot of variance in this position from year to year. So this is a position I'm always willing to hold and roster many tight ends. It takes multiple years sometimes for these guys to break out. I always like to stash the tight end position. So I'm keeping TJ Hockenson. That was an easy one for me. Gunnar Helm, Michael Mayer, Chigakonkwo, Jatavian Sanders, Jake Tongas. We're keeping all of these guys. Those ones are easy for me. On the fringe, we have Ben Sinnott and Noah Gray. Sinnott is a guy that I think we should lean towards keeping at the moment. You have Zach Ertz injury last year, maybe a potential retirement for Zach Ertz. Ben Sinnott is the only other tight end right now that I think has a pathway to starting numbers here in Washington. That is assuming they don't add another tight end. They could definitely do it, but at this point in time with Zach Ertz injury and the retirement potentially there, I think you hold Ben Sinnott. He has a profile where he could be fantasy relevant. Just hasn't came to fruition yet with Ben Sinnott. So I'm going to hold him. He's a keep for me potentially. But if you're in a shallower league, things like that, again, I think he's on the fringe, so you have to make that decision. Noah Gray is another player that has a retirement potentially looming. It's Travis Kelce. I think Travis Kelce is going to come back, but Noah Gray has been relevant for fantasy when Travis Kelce has been injured or out of the lineup for the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think Noah Gray is another guy that is probably on the fringe. I'm more okay with cutting Noah Gray, though, if you want to move on from him potentially. And then the other cut candidates for me, Darnell Washington and Eric All. Darnell, it's got multiple guys in front of him. Nothing's changing this year. And Eric All, also a guy who's dealt with some injury and has multiple guys in Noah Fant. Noah Fant is a free agent, though, and Mike Gesicki ahead of him on the depth chart. So I'm okay cutting those guys if you want to move on from them. Now let's move on to the positions that you guys really want to talk about. One of them is going to be the running back position right here. I think I'm more than likely to be stashing running backs as we get closer to in season than I am early in the offseason. Now the reason why is I think there's a lot of running backs that we see the value increase happen because of injury or guys getting hurt and, guys just moving up the depth chart because of injury related things. That doesn't happen in the offseason. Guys aren't playing football. Guys don't get hurt. It's very rare that guys get hurt when they're not on the football field, obviously, unless you're Joe Mixon. But at the end of the day, I think this is something where if you need some roster flexibility right now, I'm okay moving off of some of these running backs, and I would probably be picking up more running backs as we get into June, July, August, closer to the NFL season. Now, that said, there's a lot of guys on this list that were very easy keeps for me. Bashal Tootin, Braelon Allen, Tyrone Tracy, Caleb Johnson, Sean Tucker, Jonathan Brooks, Brian Robinson Jr. All of these guys are very, very easy keeps. Keaton Mitchell, Brashard Smith, Isaiah Davis, Jaden Blue, Ray Davis, James Conner, and LaQuint Allen are also going to be keeps for me. A couple of these guys are free agents. Also, these are just high-quality backups that I think, when given opportunity, are going to be in a role. So let's go to the fringe guys, really. That's where I want to have the most discussion. Let's talk Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller is a player that people have been high on. We made a video about Kendre Miller 2 years ago about him potentially being a stash, and it never really worked out. I think this is a player who needs Alvin Kamara to get cut or have no added running back competition. We've seen Jeremiah Love sometimes get mocked over to the New Orleans Saints, so I think this is a player that has to overcome quite a few things. It hasn't worked out, injuries and things like that. He may need a change of scenery. He can't really have that this year, so I am leaning potentially on cutting Kendre Miller if you need the space. Trevor Etienne's another player that I lean cutting at the moment. Rico Dowdle is a free agent for this team, but I do believe that they see Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks, who I obviously have as a keep on this list, as potential upgrades over Etienne at this point in time. So he feels like a guy who's a special teamer, a third on the depth chart type of guy, something like that. Najee Harris is a player who's coming off of a major injury, and he's probably not starting running back material anymore at this point in time, but he is a free agent. So because of that, there is some mystery box appeal with him where could he get into a different situation where people start to maybe like Najee Harris just a little bit. Because of that, I'm probably going to be keeping him and stashing him through free agency to see where he lands. Taj Brooks is another player that I thought could be involved, especially this year with that shallow depth chart there in Cincinnati. He was a late round guy that we liked a lot in last year's draft class. It's probably not going to happen. If it didn't happen this year, you're getting outsnapped by Samaje Perine. There's other guys on the depth chart that are getting touches before you. Probably not going to happen. They could add some more competition here this year, and because of that, I'm going to lean cutting Taj Brooks. Let's group in the two Niners receivers together, Jordan James and Isaac Guerrero. I think both of these guys you could lean towards keeping. Now, the reason is Brian Robinson is a free agent. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is older. He has some carries on his body. There is some things like that. We've seen Kyle Shanahan have these backup running backs who are relevant for fantasy. He's always willing to go and get another running back, so he could definitely do that this year. I think when you look at these two guys, I'm leaning towards keeping both of them for now. I don't think you have to keep them throughout the whole offseason, but these are guys that I still have questions. Is Jordan James the better player, or is Isaac Guerrero the better player? I think you also have to think about new competition. Like I said, Shanahan is never afraid to go get some more running backs, and it's a decent free agent running back class. So if they don't pay Brian Robinson, could they go pay another running back to be the backup to Christian McCaffrey? So for now, I will lean towards keeping these guys. I'm not holding them very long. If we see added competition in this backfield, I'm more than okay with cutting them. And then Marshawn Lloyd is the last player in that fringe territory for me. Injuries have destroyed the opportunity opportunity that Marshawn Lloyd has had in front of him as the potential RB2 behind Josh Jacobs. Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks, though, the two guys that have taken advantage of the opportunity while Marshawn has been hurt, are both free agents this year. So Marshawn Lloyd, we need to see him stay healthy. You could keep him, you could cut him. If you're over the injuries, I don't blame you. I think you can cut him, but he's a player that I would lean towards keeping just because the free agent running backs ahead of him are potentially going to be hitting the market. Now, some of the guys that I think are easier cuts, obviously you have Audric Estime, Bam Knight, Will Shipley, Michael Carter, Kareem Hunt, Khalil Mullings, and Khalil Herbert. I think all of these guys are third string guys. Some of them saw some opportunity last year, and Bam Knight and Michael Carter, even Audric Estime to an extent, because of multiple injuries in front of them. I just don't think that these guys are really worth roster spots right now when I can stash tight ends who have clear pathways to opportunity without the injury, or maybe even some wide receivers who are potential free agents or on the depth chart behind a potential free agent where I could see a value increase, because these guys right now, I'm just viewing these guys as like third string special teamers, role guys that, need a couple of injuries to fall in front of them for them to be fantasy football relevant. And I don't expect the guys who are free agents, Hunt, Knight, and Carter, to get any type of big money in free agency, especially with this running back free agency class. So yeah, I think all of those guys are easy cuts. Let's move on to the wide receivers. The wide receivers, the last position we will talk about in detail. Right now, there's lots of keeps. The list has a lot of really solid names. And like I said, we're playing with that 25 to 30 roster spots in a 10 to 12 man league. So you should be keeping quite a few of these players. There were some names on here that I thought were somewhat surprising. They were not players that I would be thinking of cutting. Those are going to be guys like Jalen Knoll, but even guys like Kayshon Boutte, Isaac Tesla, Alec Iomanner, Shamir DK, Jalen McMillan, Adonai Mitchell, Kyle Williams, Torrey Horton, Stefon Diggs, Deebo Samuel. These are still players that I think can be fantasy football relevant and have showed fantasy football relevancy. So unless you're in a very, very shallow league, you probably need to be keeping these guys. Trey Tucker, Marvin Mims, Jack Besh, Tez Johnson, Legette, Demario Douglas, Malik Washington, Cedric Tillman, Rashod Bateman. Those guys all round out the keeps for me right here. And I think this is probably one of the harder positions to stash, but I do think you have some more sell windows. I mean, I talked about it. Throughout the offseason in your league, you're going to have guys who have free agent wide receivers in front of them. They move up the depth chart. The wide receiver position is one of the positions that has the most movement year by year in free agency and in the NFL draft in the actual NFL. So you're going to see these value increases that spike for 1 to 2 weeks or a month at a time, where you can potentially get some sell windows to get some thirds or some fourth round picks and move out of these guys and liquidate them. So these are players I'm okay stashing a little bit. It is a tougher position to stash, I will admit, though. So that being said, let's go to the fringe guys. Dante Thornton, he's a guy that I think a lot of people are struggling with right now. I was struggling with him a little bit. I think he could see a little bit of a value bump now that Lockett is gone. Pete Carroll is no longer there, but they have to add no competition for him to be relevant. I'll lean towards keeping him until I see the competition get added, but it feels like it's almost going to happen 100%. Obviously, there's no 100% in free agency or in the NFL, but feels like they're going to add some more wide receiver help, and that would make Dante Thornton a lot less enticing. Jalen Lane's another player that I think is interesting. This team has some free agents in front of them. You have Deebo Samuel, who's a free agent, Noah Brown, Treylon Burks. There's a couple other guys here that are going to be free agents for the Washington Commanders. So I think he's interesting. He saw the 4th most snaps last year for Washington wide receivers. So if you're in a 12-man league, I'm definitely keeping. 10-man, you could lean cut, but I still think he's interesting for the Commanders. Christian Kirk is next up. He's set to hit free agency this summer. I don't really know how much is left in the tank for him, but because he's the mystery box free agency type of guy, I'm going to hold him through free agency and see where the landing spot is at. Luke McCaffrey is another player for the Commanders. I talked about all the free agents, but he was getting outplayed and outsnapped by guys like Treylon Burks and Jalen Lane this year. So Luke McCaffrey, I don't really think there's a pathway for him to be relevant here with the Commanders. I'm going to lean towards cutting Luke. Roman Wilson's another player. He struggled with some injuries early on in his career. Maybe the new coaching staff will like him. You do have Calvin Austin, who's a free agent, so probably worth still holding on to Roman. And Cooper Kupp is another player that I think is interesting because it does feel like there's not a lot left in the tank for him, but he does seem like he found a new home in Seattle. It's a good situation. He's likely probably going to have to restructure that contract if he wants to stay there long term. But if you're a contending team, you can definitely keep Cooper Kupp. If you're a rebuilding team, you probably shouldn't have him on the roster. I'm not dropping him. I'm trying to sell him for whatever I can, but there's no point in Cooper Kupp staying on a rebuilding team. So that's kind of where I'm at with these guys. The guys that I think are cut worthy: Flournoy, Mechie, Jalen Naylor, Devon Vele, Jimmy Horn, Keandre Lambert Smith, Savion Williams, Treylon Burks, Jalen Tolbert, Efton Chisholm, and Jalen Polk. And hopefully that covers every single person that you guys submitted submitted to me asking for advice on what to do with them, and hopefully that gives some clarity on how I view these guys right now. I know we didn't go super deep into the keeps. Those guys are just players that I think need to be on the rosters at the moment in time. But the fringe players, I think we needed to have some good discussions about. And the cut players, those guys, I'm just not seeing a lot of upside right now with holding some of those players on my roster. I'd rather have the flexibility of adding some free agents after my rookie draft, or just having some players at some onesie positions, quarterback, tight end, and maybe have the opportunity to find a diamond in the rough through free agency or player movement in the NFL, because that's one of the biggest ways to see some value increases is by tracking free agency and potential roster movements and seeing which guys can move up or down the depth chart. That's the best way to look at that. So there you have it, folks. That is all of those players, 100-ish players that I'm going to be making those keep, fringe, or cut decisions, mainly just the keep and cut decisions for you guys. Hopefully that was helpful. It was a little bit of a different video. I thought it would be fun to ask you guys your thoughts on which players you actually needed help with making those decisions on. So hopefully we could give you some applicable advice. If you liked today's video, if I helped you make a roster decision on one player, one way or another, please do me the favor, hit that like button. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed to this channel. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers now. So we just passed 7K. Thank you guys for that. We're on the road to 10K. Hopefully we can get there sometime by the end of this year. And that being said, if you are not a member of the Discord, that is where I gathered a lot of these names. Go join that free Discord. That Discord is linked in the description. Like I said, it's free to join, so there is no risk in doing that. With all that out of the way, nothing else for you guys today. I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.